was the work of the Turngat, which the university calls spirits of the mountains, but you can find an article written by a convert to Christianity who tries to define what these spirits and beliefs actually are under their new religion. He didn't try to pull off the Uno reverse card that practices like Hinduism do. Oh, you've got a new character? Welcome to the roster. So a Turngat is a disembodied spirit that causes misfortune, which on the low end means your tools break and on the high end means a possession. So the writer acknowledges that it's basically a demon. But not all Turngat stories depict them as evil. The writer thinks it's because the tribal shamans are in on it too and part of the problem. Okay, so current culprits are evil spirits, or trippy rocks. Well, from there, part of the mine was converted into a British command bunker during World War II, and over the years, the soldiers there began to find strange artifacts. These are your save points, and they give you strange visions of Howard, yourself, strangers you don't recognize, and Philip thinks they're taking part of his soul. Strange events and deaths continued, other scientists came to study the strange mutations in the wildlife, and it wasn't until a massive unknown disaster happened that the place was finally shut down. But it wasn't long after until another group began to set up, including Howard. They called the facility the Shelter and began to set up purely to study all the strange things happening, and they operated here with only relatively minor incidents for a good 30 years. Researching the strange substances, the wildlife, the artifacts, everything. And their reports don't come across like a government agency. They refer to their ranks by castes and imply that their work there has some kind of higher purpose. The Shelter is just one spot of interest, and they're powerful enough to operate all around the world. So does that make Red, the deranged voice, a secret society member? Nope, he's a simple miner who was caught in a cave-in. He spent 30 years reading, scavenging, and barely surviving in the dark. When you finally reach him, he's locked himself inside of an industrial furnace and is begging you to kill him. And he cannot be convinced otherwise.
On the far side of the planet.
You may wish to find what it is you seek, but that is it.
Our fighters are mopping up the last of the recon. Pick it now, nothing serious.
Or else you would seek anything
But
else
I've isolated approach
Red sounds
signatures
equally
from multiple
happy and
CCS
sad
class
that you're there to
battle
kill
groups.
him.
Make
He's
it 3
solidly
capital
barricaded
ships
in with
per
a key need to
group.
progress, so
And
there's
in
no
about
going
90
back.
seconds,
He
they'll
says
be
he's
all
wanted to
over
die for
us.
years, but it's against the
Well, that's
rules,
it
so he hasn't done
Bring
so.
combat
The big
on
cross he
right
left at the front of the
I want
machine could
everyone
be
in
that
this
he
thing.
fears the sin of
Everyone,
killing
sir?
himself. Or there could be more to it that you can't comprehend just yet.
And
No matter
Cortana.
the reason, it's a dark day for a barbecue.
Let's give our old friend.
It is a horribly slow process. You didn't get to know Red well, but they made his death so long and agonizing that it's an effective scene. After a rough journey and putting most of the Paw Patrol 6 feet under, you can finally enter the heart of the Shelter.
5th Platoon, secure airlocks on Deck 11. 14th Platoon, rendezvous with 22nd Tactical at Bulkhead Charlie 14.
You heard the lady. Move like you got a purpose.
This is not a drill.
And that wraps
I
up
repeat,
Overture.
this is
Black Plague
not
would come out a year
drill.
later, but it picks up immediately after this concussion screen. So, let's get right into it. Philip is recast and Overture recapped in about a minute. It's more poetic than how straightforward the Overture setup was, but it feels like an appropriate shift for where the story is going.
I found a disused mining shaft and took shelter from the storm. You had to know how desperate I was. I was plagued by doubts, fears, and mysteries, and aided by a madman, Red. You had to know how lonely I was.
External and internal contacts imminent.
I incinerated my best friend.
All you greenhorns
Red told me he wanted to die.
close.
You had
This
to
is
know
gonna
how
be your
guilty I
lucky
felt.
day.
I ventured boldly onwards, and was struck down by my own heroics. You had to know how stupid I was.
Right. Let's
All
thaw
of
him
these
out.
things.
Okay.
So human,
Bringing
so
low-level systems online.
perfect.
Cracking the case in
And yet
30
still
seconds.
I failed to do what I must now ask of you.
Philip awakens somewhere in the Shelter, imprisoned, and already in a
He's
certified
hot.
Half-Life
Blowing the
crawl space
pins at
adventure.
5.
Compared to Overture, this is a proper, modern research facility. It has employee amenities, ketchup, the most lore significant of condiments, and that thing. And sometimes the world will break apart into surreal
Sorry for the
nightmares.
quick thought,
It controls the
Chief.
same, but
Things are
a
a
lot
little
has shifted in just that year.
Disorientation
For one, the
should
game
pass
looks a lot
quickly.
sharper.
Welcome back,
It might
sir.
not come across in
Glad
YouTube
you battled
compression,
with us.
especially because the game has a similar drab color scheme as the
Chief,
previous
please look
one,
around the
but
room.
when you compare an
We need to get a
identical room like the
calibration
boat
reading for your
cabin,
battle
you can see where
system
improvements to the lighting change the
Good.
mood of an area.
Thank you, sir.
Some assets have been touched up here and there, but there's also a greater variety in locations. Hearing that Black Plague is in one research base makes it sound like it would be more static compared to
Vital signs
Overture.
look normal.
But no, they let you
Freezer burn.
explore a lot of the parts of the
Okay, sure.
space,
Go ahead
and
and
then
find out
areas
the crowd,
beyond that
too.
when things take a turn for the surreal. Aspects that were great before, like the sound, have better mixing and new enhancements. The soundtrack is a lot less repetitive and uses its high points more effectively.
I gave you a double dose of the wake-up still. Take a quick walk around the cryo bay and join me at the optical diagnostic station when you're ready.
You can see the better production value all over the place, and this even extends into the puzzles. Overture was logical, but mainly physics problem solving, which Black Plague still has plenty of. But now more problems require grisly and unusual solutions, like needing to extract blood for a door lock because a new policy banned the unpure, at least according to the daily special menu. You might need to grab a severed head, some other body parts like you're digging through a Goodwill. Shai Hulud has a crackhead cousin causing problems, and some...
Try targeting the flashing lights again. Is that better, or should I switch it back? Okay, try looking up and down again, please. Do you want me to leave it like that or switch it again? Okay, I'll leave the pitch normal, but if you want, you can change it yourself later. I'm ready for the energy shield test now.
Please follow me to the energy shield test station.
Fire teams, report to defensive positions Alpha through Sierra. Sensors show inbound Covenant boarding craft. Stand by to repel boarders.
Sir, I need you to look at me so we can begin. Okay, bring his energy shields online, please.
All right, shields read as fully charged.
Okay, sir. Bring them down to test the automatic recharge.
Recharging normally. We're showing green across the board.
Bridge to Cryo 2, this is Captain Key. Send the Master Chief to the bridge immediately.
Captain, we'll have to skip the weapons diagnostics and
On the double, crewman.
Aye, aye, sir. The skipper seems jumpy. We'd better get moving. We'll find you weapons later.
Okay, I'll leave the self-diagnostics running at least. Oh god, they're trying to get through the door! Security! Intruders in Cryo 2!
Sam! Sam! Come on, we've got to get the hell out of here. This way!
Captain Keyes.
Good to see you, Master Chief. Things aren't going well. Cortana did her best, but we never really had a chance.
A dozen Covenant superior battleships against a single Halcyon-class cruiser. With those odds, I'm content with 3, make that 4 kills. Sleep well?
No thanks to your driving, yes.
So you did miss me.
Report!
It must have been one of their boarding parties. I'd guess an antimatter charge.
Ma'am! Fire control for the main cannon is offline!
Captain, the cannon was my last offensive option.
All right, then. I'm initiating Cold Protocol Article 2. We're abandoning the auto. That means you too, Cortana.
While you do what? Go down with the ship?
In a manner of speaking. The object we found, I'm gonna try and land the Autumn on it.
With all due respect, sir, this war has enough dead heroes.
I appreciate your concern, Cortana, but it's not up to me. The protocol is clear. Destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable, and that means you're leaving ship. Lock in a selection of emergency landing zones, upload them to my neural lace, and then sort yourself for a heart transfer.
Aye, aye, sir.
Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship. keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research, Earth.
I understand.
The Autumn will continue evasive maneuvers until you initiate a landing sequence. Not that you'll listen, but I'd suggest letting my subroutines handle the final approach.
Excellent work, Cortana. Thank you. Are you ready?
Yank me.
Good luck, Master Chief.
Your architecture isn't much different from the Autumn's.
Don't get any funny ideas.
I don't keep it loaded, son. You'll have to find ammo as you go.
Warning! By order of Ecumen Council, proximity to Installation 04 is forbidden. Your continued presence will result in most unpleasant countermeasures. I must insist that you immediately change course and return to a minimum safe distance of 1 light year. This has served as your one and final warning. I have activated defensive systems, and you now have 30 seconds to return to the minimum safe distance of... Wait. Curious. Curious indeed, after all these years. Greetings, humans, and welcome to Installation 04. Ignore prior warnings, and please continue. I have disabled defensive systems to allow your approach, but you must not exit your ship once you have arrived at the designated landing center. This ring contains significant dangers, and even with your assumed legacy, I must verify the presence and pitch of your gauge before allowing full access. We have much to discuss, humans. I have been away far too long. You have been away far too long.
Those Marines could use some help, Chief. Do what you do best.
Follow me!
The player in the boots of one of the soldiers responding to the incident. While the core game portrayed them as invariable, remorseless killers and thugs, Opposing Force pulls off the remarkable feat of making the brutality of the military response comprehensible, even vaguely sympathetic, as you find yourself in a situation more hostile and intractable than anything you could have reasonably been expected to face. Op 4 kicks this off by taking a cue from the movie Predator, starting not with a tram ride, but with the crass and playful banter of a squad being airlifted to a mission that, by all accounts, will be entirely found, expectations low, and just as you're about to think, the Roscoe is shot down by forces from the intermission. The squad of are scattered, information is scarce, and survival is none. Brass says that the scientists are
attach their boarding craft.
and in the soldier's anger over being thrust into an unwinnable confrontation, the decision is made that the scientists pay. The shift into this new angle of implementation is handled incredibly well, with new development team and gearbox emphasizing a new perspective and levels that are slightly more ambitious and dramatic than the original version. Subtle changes, like the recoloring of the player display, further reinforce the feeling of playing the same situation in a totally new way. The changes go far beyond this level. Opposing Force Force is a true expansion pack, adding whole new categories of weapons and enemies, and providing a campaign about confidence and in the age of DLC, that seems like a tremendous amount of content, but the thing about expansion packs is that they had to be big enough to sell on the retail market, on store shelves, usually for $120. Living up to the original game is obviously a major, partly out of the obvious connection Gearbox has with the source material, and partly because a major expansion like Opposing Force was great business sense at the time. The weapons, like light machine gun, the sniper rifle, and a very curious portal gun, are all great additions to the game, and very useful to apply this. The great thing about Opposing Force is that, as a trained soldier, you immediately seem more qualified to handle an alien invasion, and the threats you face are rampant. Later in the expansion, you'll fight alongside a full squad of soldiers over a several-block all-out ground war against the Federation. It is totally different than just scraping by. The inclusion of squad members, like having medics, different varieties of soldiers, and engineers to blow through charges just like they deployed against you in the core game, makes the combat feel more robust and the stakes much higher. You're the ones who are supposed to handle the situation, but the situation is way beyond your capacity to manage. The game also takes place deeper into the Black Mesa conflict, letting the player actually catch up with Frank and land it. During the first third of the game, so you're in the same kind of thing as the last two, with Freeman already out. Meanwhile, you'll briefly visit Zen, and you'll attempt to foil a plot to destroy Black Mesa with a nuclear warhead. Gearbox's grasp of what works best about Half-Life's level design is very solid, and the same kinds of industrial natures that are so endearing in the core game are expanded on nicely. Gearbox isn't quite as good about realistically blending the puzzles and the combats, however, and the puzzle sequences seem obvious and abrupt much of the time. They're usually a little more irritating and a little less imaginative than the core games as well. But it works, and mostly it works wonderfully. Take the toxic garbage that replaces the 3-tentacle creature with a classic blast pitch. The solution is far, far more clearly telegraphed and more gamified, forcing you to use a tamed barnacle to hop from wall to wall. Yet, it's paced more tightly and comes across as much more tolerant. That's the difference you can see between Valve and Gearbox levels, the naturalism giving way somewhat to bombast. Opposing Force ends with another boss fight, this one much less obtuse but equally irritating, again requiring the use of a weaponized barnacle to pull yourself between turrets while exposing the weird worm thing's glowing vulnerable spot over and over again. It's a setup so obvious and so influenced by arcade boss fights that it breaks the naturalistic tone that Half-Life games thrive on wide open. Beating Opposing Force is easier to figure out and easier to accomplish than Half-Life, but it's so ham-fistedly done that it's hard to say that it's actually any better than the impossibly frustrating fight from the core experience. But an uninspired victory is still a victory. The G-Man then comes to visit your character, saving you from the nuclear blast you've been thwarted in preventing. Black Mesa is completely destroyed. Then the G-Man strands you in a void, unable to share any information you've learned, but on hand, in case you prove useful. That is the last you will ever hear about Shepard in the whole franchise,
life pods are launching.
although that Half-Life 2 much unofficially.
Blast doors closing.
It's kind of an anticlimax, though it has made many people curious if Corporal Shepard has a role yet to play in unreleased installments of Half-Life. The next expansion would come out mid-2001, quite a while after Half-Life's release. It would include a free copy of Opposing Force and the High Definition Pack, a minor makeover for the game's textures, most notably weapons and enemies, that would also retroactively change textures in the original Half-Life if you go back and play it. As released in 1998, the game was noticeably a little blander and a little fuzzier than Blue Shift wanted to be. The changes aren't major, but they do make the game a whole lot crisper. When I originally did this video, I used the Blue Shift HD pack because I preferred it so strongly. I changed my mind this time because I wanted to better reflect what the games would have looked like on release, but I've left them on here to show the textures off in their natural habitat. Blue Shift is the story of the Black Mesa disaster told through the eyes of the security guard you see stranded on the platform at the very beginning of the original game. Blue Shift's development was a little screwed. It started out as an exclusive series of levels from the auditory of the game to Sega minigames, which were then expanded and fell flat. The result was an expansion about half as long as Opposing Force with none of the new aliens and weapons, even reducing your weapon selection down from what's available in the original. And this is something you would have paid $40 for. The inherent lack of content for the money made most critics at the time inclined to rip Blue Shift a new one and drive down its critical score much lower than anything else in the franchise. But looking back on it, it is much easier to be forgiving. What Blue Shift actually was, in terms of format, was DLC, a short news story branching off the main campaign that should have been priced at like $10. But dial-up was still the reality for most people in 2001, and digital distribution was not practical yet, so the company had to make a profit with Blue Shift as a retail product, even though it didn't remotely live up to content expectations. Now that so much time has passed, Blue Shift can be looked at purely for what it is as a Half-Life experience, as the tightest and the funnest of the 3 Gearbox releases, and one of the rare shooters that you can finish in a single sitting. Blue Shift benefits a great deal from its shortness and the motivations of its character, Barney Calhoun. Seeing Black Mesa from the perspective of a petty employee is great. Scientists are dismissive of you, you're not authorized to know anything about where you are or what you're doing, your job is difficult, confusing, and thankless. As Barney, you get to see Black Mesa from the bottom of the pit. He remains a savior thing, everyone comes there for some of his success. Shepard is a professional soldier. Calhoun is just trying to collect his value, and it's exactly the right point for a final setting. As the game progresses, you're not trying to save the base or the world, you're trying to get out and save yourself. The level design here is classic Half-Life, absolutely on par with the core game, although some sections, like the Corridor puzzle, do stand out as being notably poorer than one of the other systems. Blue Shift moves at a very fast pace, and that's its saving grace. Even if one section might just you'll be moving on to the next before you know it. Blue Shift also features the first time you consistently interact with the that could potentially get all of you off base. I'm a huge sucker for getting people seeing versions of that, so I was pretty sold on it. But even the later stories of life, providing a tremendous amount of fun. Even the sentence segments of the show are actually fun to play. Opposing force on the briefings of this much larger, including a fantastic set-piece battle, where you try to calibrate and defend a portal damage to the Blue Shift also shoots boss fights instead of using climactic defense sequences used with Dr. Rosenberg's cognitive scientists instead. Escape through Blue Shift has an actual happy ending where, after
get aboard before it launches.
You get to escape the facility with the scientists in a regular time, leaving by SUV from a remote part of the base well before the nuclear blast at the end of the It is nothing but a fun...
Now would be a very good time to leave.
Black Mesa incident. For 7 years now, I've been getting comments along the lines of, how could you forget Half-Life Decay? So I'll tell you how I could have forgotten it, because it is a co-op title released only with the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life, which can't even be completed in single player, and has no impact on anything else that happens in the franchise. A version for PC has been created by dedicated modders, but it's really only functional over local area network. If you're at the mercy of the 2 to 4 internet servers left available, a server reset could invalidate your entire progress through the expansion. It's also hot garbage in both level design and encounter design compared to even Blue Shift. The co-op aspect has led Gearbox to just dump enemies into bland arenas like never before.
Keys is going in manual.
The only story question it answers is who called the cops in the first place, which turns out to be Blue Shift's Dr. Rosenberg. Had I known, I might have left him in that train car, the jackass. The thing is, while Decay might not be enjoyable or accessible to play in the modern era, there's no denying that it's an intensely curious novelty.
We'll be fine.
Years and years before Portal 2, we have the first major co-op experience in the Half-Life universe. It features 2 women scientists, Cross and Green, in their own personalized HEV suits as the protagonists. It features the same voice actors as Blue Shift, and a disabled scientist as the main character. If it wasn't for the fact that it's awful to play, and infinitely more awful to try to set up a dedicated server for, it would be a much more meaningful part of the franchise canon. After all, it's one of the women in Decay who canonically deliver the sample to Gordon that day in the test chamber. You can even watch her do it on the security monitor in Blue Shift. As it is, there are a lot of people, lifelong Half-Life fans, who have never even heard of it. I haven't improved myself as a fan for suffering through it, but I think I have improved my understanding of the trajectory of the broader franchise by considering this early co-op prototype every bit as clunky and carefully obscured as Rosenberg's original flavor portal device.
Can you move?
But the Half-Life experience is more extensive than the official titles. Alongside the game itself, Half-Life was distributed with the tools that the modding community needed to craft the Gold Source engine into whatever the independent programmer envisioned. At first, this led to a proliferation of amazing multiplayer mods that expanded the standard offerings of Deathmatch into highly specialized and distinct game experiences. The most popular and most enduring of these would be Counter-Strike, a game focused primarily on reaction speed and map knowledge. Competitive CS matches would become incredibly popular in the emerging esports movement, and there was actual money to be made by top players before too long. Team Fortress Classic, a Half-Life update of a very popular Quake 1 mod, was both a fan favorite and a triumph of clever multiplayer design. TFC is more complicated than Counter-Strike by far, letting players choose between classes with different weapons and statistics who function collaboratively with one another in a variety of red team versus blue team conflicts like capture the flag or port control. Map knowledge is also very important, but not as important as understanding how to properly play the different classes. The result is a game of freewheeling chaos channeled into tactical confrontations. Some of my favorite memories of multiplayer gaming back in my childhood are from TFC's heyday. Playing a match between two teams who really know what they were doing was a thrill that a single-player game sometimes struggles to match, seeing as it comes entirely from emergent situations and random factors. TFC wasn't the only class-based game in town, however. There's also Day of Defeat, a phenomenal World War II team mod. Day of Defeat was my personal favorite, as it brought together the quick respawn rates of TFC with the realistic damage models of Counter-Strike, all playing out across very cleverly designed maps with many twists, turns, and secret routes, fought with class-specific weapons that are as fun as they are varied. Each and every one of these multiplayer mods was so good that Valve would acquire them as its own, releasing official retail versions of each one, mostly on change, alongside Half-Life 2. But as far as Half-Life 1 goes, they're just mods, which means they're free. Back in the day, if you bought Half-Life, you weren't just buying Half-Life. You were getting a whole constellation of truly fantastic independent work as well. Some of Half-Life's single-player mods are every bit as competent and extensive as the official expansions, like Opposing Force, so I'd like to briefly highlight one that I think really stands out as deserving special attention before turning the discussion to Half-Life 2. That mod is Day Hunger, Neil Mankey's zombie masterpiece, a total conversion mod that replaces almost every texture in the game with custom game resources. Half-Life used horror elements throughout its campaign, but Day Hunger would mutate and fixate on those elements, giving the player an experience totally different than how Half-Life 1 or Half-Life 2 would do their horror, but similar in the rhythm of its combat and puzzles, as well as the deliberate naturalism of its environments. Day Hunger is notable for many reasons, but map design is certainly the biggest. It relies on a blend of indoor and large outdoor areas, even more than Half-Life 1 did, sending you on an extremely long overland journey through woods, swamps, and train routes, all overflowing with the living dead. The mod's other great strength is atmosphere. The Half-Life engine isn't that great with lighting or sound, but Day Hunger takes it crafting environments that are genuinely creepy and strange, but grounded, of course, in a realistic design aesthetic. It's particularly noticeable in quality in the portions of the mod while you're in town. The mod has everything it needs to hold up over time. Fun voice acting, great custom sound effects and textures, challenging and eerie environments. It's even got primitive vehicle portions. It is a triumph, flat out. The mod was developed by Mankey's small independent studio, Black Widow Games, as a promotion for PC Gamer magazine. Back then, this kind of independent work was simple enough that small teams with limited resources could produce works of surprising length and competency, and print magazines like PC Gamer had the cash at the time to throw at projects like this. Most people, myself included, discovered Day Hunger through the demo CDs that came with PC Gamer back in those days. Mankey's other Half-Life mod, USS Darkstar, is an equally skilled work. Day Hunger provides the best complement to the official games, and best highlights what's so wonderful about this era of modding. The things about it that are unpolished and amateur are what give it an enduring charm now. It has a cork 1950s aesthetic, which the Gold Source engine's blockiness complements rather than detracts from. It's like the difference between the original Night of the Living Dead and World War Z. Yes, the more modern media surpasses the original in vision, execution, and budget by massive margins, but there's a quality to the older media that feels somehow cozier, more personal. Day Hunger exists because of a love of zombies and a love of pulp horror. It is a pure expression of that enthusiasm. Even the sewer levels in Part 2 can't fully diminish how powerful a thing that foundational love of genre is. The way this tribute is blended with the mechanical pacing and game feel of the original Half-Life is deft, bringing out the best of each other in a way that other Half-Life 1 horror mods never really even achieved for me. I've provided links to download this and a couple other great Half-Life mods in the video description. They work fine with newer versions of Steam and Windows 10, although you might have to Google out a few minor problems to get them going. At the time of its release, Half-Life 1 felt almost completely peerless. Even games like Quake 2 that would do similar things with linear level progression did so less believably, less vividly. So in making a sequel to a game that did so much right the first time, what do you do as a developer? Just more of the same? Valve chose a different path. Instead of developing an easily identifiable sequel, they wanted to make a game that would be equally novel and peerless for its 2004 release. Half-Life 2 would have a revolutionary game a brand new, highly inventive setting, lively characters full personality, and a realistic physics system. These are changes, executed with a kind of effortless ease that made Half-Life 1 so impressive. Yet, Half-Life 1 feels less dated on replay than the second one does, even where the second is improving on the first by leaps and bounds. Half-Life 1's constellation of campaigns can be seen and played fully as their own universe, and they feel more tightly bound to each other than what comes next. Still, what does come next lays the foundation for an entirely new generation of gaming than the first helped pioneer. Where Half-Life 1 was a new perspective on the cliches of classic disaster sci-fi, Half-Life 2 is a stylistically unique, visually imaginative take on the totalitarian dystopia. As the game opens, it's been an indeterminate number of years since Black Mesa, but enough years for the world as you had known it to have been completely destroyed. Tearing down the borders between worlds is something that attracts attention, apparently. And in the aftermath of Black Mesa, a multi-dimensional alien player called the Combine invaded Earth, accepting the planet's surrender in just 7 hours. The Combine control of Earth is total, and the suppression field of some sort against childhood, the sad, downtrodden remnants of humanity you see in the last generation. A huge alien structure, the Citadel, looms hundreds of stories about City-17, a non-specific metropolis somewhere in Eastern Europe. The man responsible for the surrender, Dr. Reed, was the administrator of Black Mesa mentioned so cryptically in the first game. He serves as the face of the Combine occupation of Earth and the game's principal antagonist. But if you think Green's going to be some sinister, mysterious figure, you're wrong. The minute you step off the train and see his smiling face and hear his smiling words, you know you're not dealing with a despot, you're dealing with a sellout. It's indicative of the whole new approach to story and script writing Half-Life 2 would revolve around, a deeply human, fallible, strongly characterized cast of scientists, soldiers, monsters, and the oppressed. Emotion was the biggest thing missing from Half-Life 1, and Valve went out of their way to make sure that every major character was distinct, memorable, and motivated by real human concerns in the second game. What's especially fun about it is that they use many of the same voice actors, giving a wonderful feeling of continuity despite the massive shift in narrative approach. You don't spend a huge amount of time with the characters, but it's their concerns, their needs, your connection to the characters that sustains a player's motivation through the game. Green is a fantastic example. As the game begins, he's just so damn comfortable up in his tower.
This cave is not a natural formation.
Cold, otherworldly steel
Someone built
atop the Citadel.
So it must lead.
Humanity was doomed anyway.
With
submission, at least there's a chance for survival in some capacity, right? And what harm is there? It works out a little better for numero uno
We should
than
show
for the
them
rest
who
of
they're
them.
dealing with.
Green's self-satisfaction makes the player so much more inclined to top the power than if he was portrayed as simply a blood and power-hungry dictator. Throughout the game, you'll see how essentially powerless Green really is, what a pathetic pretender he's been, presiding over the end of the world in a turtleneck sweater. The first game didn't even have a specific antagonist. Black Mesa itself, every part of it, in every way, was your principal opponent. Having someone to fight with, instead of having just something to fight through, is a great design shift. There's a line of criticism about Half-Life 2 that's gained a lot of traction lately, where the character interactions, warm as the voice acting is, are seen as fundamentally pandering and cloying. I've been curious to see if that criticism would bear out for me, playing it 16 years after its release and 7 years after the last time I had at it, and I have to say, I do think it's much too harsh. Yes, the savior-protagonist elements are dialed up a great deal from what came before, but it's important to consider the technology at play that set the stage for this debate to even occur. The Source engine was capable of rendering the most detailed and expressive faces yet seen in 2004 when the game was released. As superior as the id Tech engines were to Source when it came to textures and to lighting, they produced faces that were just pure plastic in comparison to Source at the time. Replaying it, I think about how acting changed from the silent movie era onwards. Without voices, people acted in ways that seem alien and over the top to convey the emotion or to convey the plot. Half-Life 2 is certainly more natural than silent movies, but the Cheers-ish quality of everyone knowing your name is often an excuse just to have characters smile at you. which at the time was an incredible technological breakthrough. Take Barney Calhoun, Blue Shift's protagonist and the first friendly face you'll encounter in Half-Life 2, working undercover with Civil Protection, the lowest rank of the Combine oppressors. There is nothing special about his dialogue. But even all this time later, I'm swayed by his charm. I believe fully that he is happy to see me, and I find I'm very happy to see him in return. This tactical, technical reliance on overfamiliarity may grate on some players and contributes to what feels dated about the title, but I'm not at all inclined to call it a negative. It's part of why I loved the game in the first place, and I don't think I'll ever really be able to let that feeling go. You may not remember Dr. Kleiner and Dr. Eli Vance very well from the first game since they didn't have names at the time, but these scientists from the Sector C test labs also make a welcome return. Plus, they add Vance's daughter, Alex, who serves as Gordon's sidekick for portions of the game. Even the Vortigaunts are allies now, things having panned out that the creatures you defeated at the end of Half-Life was keeping their race in servitude. Should the Vortigaunts have held the battle at Black Mesa against Freeman? It's much more fascinating that they choose not to, that they become brothers in arms from a dimension conquered by the Combine at a much earlier point in their history. They have a stage presence that would have been difficult for the Gold Source engine of Half-Life 1 to convey. The new Source engine, which Valve developed for Half-Life 2 and which has powered over a decade of their subsequent releases, can do incredibly complicated facial expressions beyond just grinning, and do the transitions between these expressions in a way that does look natural, convincingly natural. Half-Life 2 was one of the very first games to have characters express an array of emotions, non-verbal, and in a cinematically passive way. It had some of the first technology capable of producing that. It is a perfect example of pushing technology forward in a way that lets artistry flow more easily. One thing they did not update, however, was Gordon. The temptation to give Gordon a voice must have been even stronger in developing the second game, with how deep the interactions between characters would be. But Valve, once again, resisted, and they did it in a way that's so quirky it actually contributes a lot to the game's charisma. Everyone acknowledges that Gordon is unusually quiet, but no one makes a big deal out of it. You're included in what's being discussed, but with a friendly understanding that you're just not much of a conversationalist. When emotions run high, this is a particularly solid choice, and against expectations, the game is actually a lot stronger for letting however the player feels and whatever the player thinks be the way it is, with any expectation of feedback on Gordon's part removed. So, with the new setting and no voice, how do you make the player feel like they're playing the same Gordon Freeman as the first game? Again, an understated approach on my part. It's the HEV suit that puts the most work into providing continuity, and its symphony of sound effects, all of them back again and sounding a little smoother but otherwise unchanged, that does the trick. Old sound effects in a new setting seems like such a simple element, it wouldn't be the principal way to tie the experience of being the same Gordon in different games together, but it is. It's part of what makes Half-Life so specifically, indelibly, Half-Life. The environment wasn't given any less of a role on account of this new focus on character and narrative, however. In nearly every way, City 17 and its environs are even more impressive and majestic than Black Mesa ever was. Like the first game, the great strength of Half-Life 2 is its impressively naturalistic presentation and pacing, the entire game told in first person with no cutscenes, every mile of your journey told continuously. Every step, you really feel like you're gunning your way through Earth's final days. The oceans are being drained, the invasive ecosystems of other dimensions have slipped through, turning the wilderness into something more strange and more savage than ever before. Humanity lies cooped up in its crumbling, useless cities, stripped of their names and stripped of their purpose.
A lot more crew made it off the
This
Autumn than I had predicted.
combination of a realistic, totally deadpan presentation with these amazing, fantastical world-building elements results in an experience that is almost effortlessly immersive, much more so than even the first game was. On replaying it so many years later, it is a little visually sparser than I remember in many ways. The Source engine was modified and advanced so many times in the interval since Half-Life 2's release that I had simply gotten used to the Source engine being used to present more baroque and lush environments. If you played the Black Mesa remake instead of Half-Life 1, you end up swapping from just about the most impressive rendering the Source engine to the most stock standard and basic things as you move from that story into this one. It doesn't detract from what's visually impressive about Half-Life 2 for me, because I remember how groundbreaking it was and how blown away I was personally in 2004. But if you're new to the franchise, it can be a little startling how undecorated the environments look by modern standards. At the time, what was such an achievement with the Source engine was the fidelity and sharpness of the textures. To accommodate that sharpness of form, extravagance of detail was removed. It feels natural enough to navigate despite the spare quality of the environment. It's some by-design friction thrown in.
There's some Marines hiding in the hills.
Picking your way through the city still requires some good old jumping puzzle acting, but most of the environmental puzzles are now geared to be solved using the game's physics engine instead, like weighing down one end of the board so it stays at the correct angle when you jump off. It often blends in much more naturally with the environment and with the rhythm of play than the original's platforming focus, but there are a number of puzzles that seem to be there for novelty alone, a gimmick-driven mechanic that ends up being every bit as tedious as pushing boxes around with your shins in the first game. Still, even if their artificiality interferes with the sense of naturalism somewhat, it's nice to use a different kind of navigation than the standard FPS impulses. The world of Half-Life 2 is sometimes playfully obtuse about where you're supposed to go next and how you're supposed to do it, but in a way that is fun and really reinforces the rogue physicist in over his head angle the game has for the player. You cover a tremendous amount of distance comparative to the first game as well, thanks to an overall very long game length for linear FPS and a couple of vehicle sequences that last for a while and span many miles. Water Hazard, where you pilot a small airboat through City 17's canal system to a dam on the outskirts of Metropolis, is a little too long and often a little too vague in some of the puzzles you'll need to solve to continue. On later playthroughs, when you're already familiar with the route, it's a lot more fun, but the first time through, the fanboat sequence is a real drag on the early game's pacing. The next vehicle sequence has you piloting a buggy up the coast from City 17 to the prison of Middle Prospect along the decaying highway leading north. This sequence, Highway 17, is by contrast one of the best in the entire game, pitting you against great exploration challenges, tremendously fun set-piece battles in small towns, and amazing artistic direction.
We have survivors.
There is not a single flavor of Half-Life 2's gameplay that you won't sample during the Highway 17 chapter. Plus, the sheer length of the journey makes reaching the prison unexpectedly rewarding. Its use of space is the exact opposite of on a rail, highly decompressed and blown out across mini-maps instead of circuitously winding through compressed areas that are smaller than they suggest. Highway 17 also highlights just how many modes of gameplay Valve included over the course of the campaign. Puzzles, platforming, stunt driving, area defense, stronghold assault, survival horror, optional exploration. It's all in there. Many game designers choose a handful of these elements to focus on and get exactly so. But Valve breaks out small, area-appropriate versions of all of them, not trying to perfect them, but using them as tools to make sure the game never feels repetitious. And they get the mix close to perfect much of the time. Half-Life 2 is especially remarkable in how it continually shifts from one mode of play into another in a way that never feels obvious and always feels
concealed in those rocks.
A mode of engagement that Half-Life 2 dabbles in more deeply than others is survival horror, with the famous We Don't Go to Raven chapter. It's set up ever so briefly, just a throwaway line about a dark, locked corridor in Black Mesa East, a kernel of curiosity that then immediately blossoms into greater grotesquerie than the series had yet leaned towards. All the Half-Life games are gory, but in a kind of strategic way, pops of blood and guts here and there for emphasis. Ravenholm takes the headcrab concept and expands on it in the creepiest possible ways. Earlier, the player witnesses the Combine using artillery shells filled with the creatures, a kind of biological weapon, a rural population suppression strategy meant to flood the Earth with the awful little parasites and force the survivors to take refuge in the numbered cities that the Combine controls. As punishment for rebellious activity, this town was shelled months ago. Enough time for everything to fester and rot. New varieties of headcrabs are introduced with equally mutant zombie components. Ravenholm's cleverness stems from how it combines environment, tools, and enemies in the most satisfying possible configurations when it's introduced to them. Take the shotgun. Just a standard FPS tool, nothing noteworthy about it on its own, unless you introduce it at the same time as the fast headcrabs and their skinless, running on all fours zombie variant. While the player is up on a series of rooftop platforms, so you get the ideal weapon to defeat the new enemy in a circumstance where you can blast them right off the side of the building and on into the streets below. Alone, these elements are pretty basic. Together, in the way they're staggered and clustered across the Ravenholm experience, they create a sense of real spectacle, real danger. Ravenholm is somewhere that the rules of the Half-Life universe shift a bit. The mood and feel of the progression changes, in an interval where the player's arsenal and expectations expand at the same time. It's also helped along by the inversion of the trap dynamic. Now it's less you and more the zombies who need to watch out for environmental dangers. You're suddenly largely in charge of these environmental traps and can use them to your advantage in what's basically an ammunition desert, a place with more enemies than you really have bullets for. This is typical for survival horror, but atypical for Half-Life. It is a deliberate choice to try to get you to acknowledge and use the traps. Otherwise, you just shoot your way through, and all that clever design would be secondary and optional. As it stands, if you're not squashing at least a few zombies with a rusted-out Leica, you're going to be shit out alive really quick. The final headcrab variant is one that I think is kind of genius, too. An ultra-toxic, all-black, extra spiny guy who takes you down to exactly 1 hit point if it lands an attack. This is different than a one-hit kill, because your HEV suit administers an antidote that takes you back up to what you had before, minus just basic headcrab damage of like 5 to 10 or so. So, these new headcrabs give an incredibly deadly impression, and are, in that really long getting hit, more dangerous than any other enemy in the franchise, but they mostly serve to make you extremely vulnerable to other enemies. Even as you regain those lost points, 1 or 2 hits from someone else will wreck you. The Black Widow variant changes the rhythm and prioritization of large encounters, as well as providing excellent jump scare material for otherwise quiet exploration segments. Plus, its zombie variant is a hive of like 4 of them, which it throws at you like grenades. Of all the zombies, it looks like the most painful and unpleasant to turn into, and that is saying something. Ravenholm takes an hour or less, and within that very short time frame, it experiments wildly with many new mechanics and modes of engagement, all of them tied to survival horror. Its compactness makes it memorable. I remembered each room and hallway playing it through this clan in a way that I rarely do with long FPS
I picked up reports that the Covenant
Besides
has
being
located and
excellent on its
secured the
own,
Pillar of Autumn's crash
it
site.
also introduces a new theme into the Half-Life formula, an eagerness to lean completely away from the main dynamic for a chapter to pursue an experimental tangent. Ravenholm is just as different from regular Half-Life 2 as Zen is from regular Half-Life 1, but it fits in so seamlessly that by the time we get to Half-Life Alyx, these survival horror elements will end up being incorporated into the main loop. Half-Life 2 already begins to merge elements from the Ravenholm chapter with the rest of itself together when finally reach the prison of Nova Prospect. As you get deeper into the complex, the resistance you face becomes overwhelming until you reach the core of the facility where it peaks. In these areas, no one who saw them is supposed to live to tell about it, so the alien corruption of the Combine begins to become a greater narrative focus. Ammunition scarcity gives way to coordinated, fierce opposition, so the oppressive feeling of having your back to the wall shifts into something slightly different without ever relenting. It dials up all this tension past to the point of sustainability, reaching a crescendo as you attempt a daring escape into a Combine portal, hoping to end up in the lab from the beginning of the game. Your teleporter malfunctions slightly, though hardly unexpectedly, and you arrive several weeks later instead. In the meantime, Armed Revolution has begun, with a new chapter of Half-Life. Your destruction of Nova Prospect inspiring the city to go broke and take back its destiny. It is a clever, efficient story. Hiding Freeman in the quantum foam for a few weeks while the plot develops was the ideal way to let the whole situation change without sacrificing the 1 foot after pacing that is so critical to Half-Life. The last third of the game is predominantly a block-by-block battle towards the Citadel where the Armed Revolution City separates populace. It's one of the best extended action sequences from that era in gaming history, a kind of War of the Worlds Stalingrad with fully automatic weapons. Delightful. While the sequence is fun and wonderful on its own, it's the way it adjusts the scale of combat and the stakes of humans' endeavors in relation to the rest of the game that makes it so great. You've gone from fugitive, hiding in the margins of City 17's decaying infrastructure, haunted constantly, to rescuer, speeding through a dying world to save their colleague, leaving the enemy on their own terms. And now it is your turn to be a revolutionary, a bright orange cog in the great machine of human liberation. The stakes are greater in terms of gameplay as well, as standoff against Striders and Combine soldiers in a half-destroyed apartment block serves as a tremendously difficult, though cleverly designed climax to Half-Life 2's gunplay. When you reach the Citadel at long last, it's one of those game moments that can just stay with you always, partly because of the lengthy build-up to the moment, and partly because it is an artistically brilliant structure with a hugely unique aesthetic quality and architecture. I'd like to take a moment and single out what an artistic achievement Combine and the Citadel are. As classic as Half-Life 1 is, nothing in it approaches the unique look and feel of Combine and Half-Life. The industrial designs are brutal but flowing, an engineering aesthetic that really is in-looking, while still being absolutely believable at the same time how confident and cohesive its presentation is. The way humanity has been accommodated to meet only its most basic physical needs, and then only very clinically and unsharingly. The way the blue steel of the Combine consumes both the cities and the people of Earth. It all adds up to an antagonist whose vastness seems as incomprehensible as its motivations, so the moments of victory you pry from the Combine seem like truly meaningful victories. When you reach the Citadel, you feel that moment of victory is so
There's our ride.
tantalizingly
Get aboard and let's get out of here.
There's a beefy chunk of game left to go that expands the scope of the game world in a way similar to how Zen recontextualized Except instead of a long, tangential feeling trip through the border world, you get an inversion of the Black Mesa inbound transit opener of the first game, a tour of the alien facility, not so unlike Black Mesa, revealing at every turn some kind of display of power that makes the human situation seem more dire than it was before. You get your all is lost moment, too, with Dr. Green. You get a supercharged gravity gun instead of regular weapons. You get a tremendously well-crafted climactic sequence